All right, to have a look at this and the rest of the day's top stories, I'm joined now by Sky News host Steve Price in Melbourne and former Speaker of the House, Bronwyn Bishop. Terrific to see you both. Bronwyn, let me start with you. What's your reaction to this revelation that the top two security chiefs, ASIO and ASIS, have been taken off the National Security Committee of Cabinet as permanent members and instead they're only invited in on a case-by-case basis?
It reaffirms all the concerns I've always had about Albo the Trot. Trot standing for Trotsky. This is the most appalling decision I think I've seen this government make because it really does put us at risk. This is a whole body of information that is gathered together so that the right decisions can be made and they're now excluded. So when we look at Albanese, he came from the far left. He was far left, hence his nickname, Albo the Trot. He hasn't changed his spots at all. China is no longer criticised. Is the fact that we've made these changes, is that the reason that China's now thinking of allowing wine back into China with a reduced tariff rate? Is it the reason for the visit we're having at the moment? What other concessions has he made? And when you look at the speech that was made by the head of ASIO very recently saying that he knows who, a former politician who let his country right down, who betrayed the country. Perhaps we might find out if he's not reappointed. Maybe he made that statement for a good reason. But I am just appalled at the direction that this government is going in all the decisions it's making. It is making this country vulnerable. And China wants us as a vassal state. Is this the first step with the kowtowing that Albanese has done to enable it to happen?
Look, I have to say, Steve, what most concerns me about all of this is the fact that we are seeing this silence on China from the Prime Minister and from Penny Wong. They rarely criticise China in public anymore. And instead, we had the Trade Minister, Don Farrell, say just yesterday that New Zealand was now our most trusted ally. That's nonsense. It's plainly untrue. But he said it the same week that China's Foreign Minister is arriving in Australia.
Well, that's right. Congratulations on breaking this very important story. And I think what we're seeing here, obviously, is the Albanese government trying to change the narrative on China, and that should worry all of us. Bronwyn's correct. I do note that our colleague Peter Credlin, I think, said something very important on her program tonight. And unlike me or you, Shari, I don't know about Bronwyn, we've not sat in that National Security Committee room. Peter has, and Peter made the point that often the head of ASIO or the head of ASIS, who is in that room, would often stop the rest of the public servants and politicians in their steps by making a statement about something that none of them knew about that was obviously very important that the country needed to know about. And so it seems to be madness, complete madness, that you have qualified heads of ASIS and ASIO excluded from a security meeting. I mean, they're the first people that you would want in the room, and you would want to listen to them. And when Burgess made that speech that Bronwyn referred to there about the former politician, maybe he stepped on a few toes. But maybe he did that deliberately because it seems he's been excluded for some time.
Yes.
But this is dreadful for the Albanese government, and it's a great opening for Peter Dutton and the coalition, who can again go back and attack this government over their lack of detail on border security and national security.
Imagine being so arrogant as the Prime Minister or Foreign Minister or Richard Marles that you wouldn't want the head of ASIO and ASIS in that room on a permanent basis. And, you know, as some of my sources have said to me, you know, it's all very well inviting them in on a case-by-case basis, but you don't know when there might be a matter that they do have expertise in that they can just offer unsolicited advice. But clearly the government doesn't want that. Now, let's move on to electricity prices. The energy regulator today announced that power bills would be reduced and that the relief would be modest for most households. But at the same time, the Australian reported today that electricity bills have increased by as much as $832 since the last election. This is massive, Bronwyn.
Absolutely. I mean, this is deliberate policy again. The cost of electricity is driven by government policy. And this lie that is told that renewables are the cheapest form of energy is just that, a lie, because you have to cost in the poles and wires, the building of the new infrastructure. All of that is part of the cost of enabling power from wind and solar to get to your house or somebody's business. And that's not being done. You also have to cost in the cost of prime land, which is now being destroyed by great panels destroying the earth and the ability to grow food. That's another cost. So there's no proper debate about renewable energy in this country at all. And the government and the opposition is quite right when they say we must have base load. It can only come from coal or from nuclear power. There's a place for windmills and solar panels, but it is fed into every aspect. It feeds into inflation, it feeds into the supermarket costs, it feeds into the price of plants in Bunnings. It absolutely feeds into everything. Yeah. And it's a deliberate policy by that idiot Bowen, who honestly has stuffed up everything he's ever touched.
Steve Price, I mean, no one plays the clips more than my mate Paul Murray about Albanese promising that electricity prices would be $275 cheaper before the last election. And yet today we learn that actually they're $870 more expensive.
Well, that's the point. I mean, when we talk about these decreases in prices announced today, that's the wholesale price. I mean, the retailers don't have to pass those prices on. They probably will. But we're talking about peanuts. I mean, remember, Sherry, we used to have, you know, when you had a federal budget, you'd have a milkshake budget tax cut. Well, this is $1, $2, $3 a week that you're going to get less on your electricity bill. It's not the $270, and even the $270 wasn't a hell of a lot. Robin makes a point there that what the government's going to try and do here is sneak through to the next election. They'll try and cover their backsides on that $270 promise, and they'll get to the next election. Then after that election, if they're re-elected for another 4 years, all of these new transmission lines are going to have to be spread across the country. The cost of those will then go into the electricity cost, and our prices will spike again. Don't fall for it, folks. This is a con.
Now, I think this is quite a big story. The Ukraine's ambassador, oh, by the way, I should say that was $832 that our electricity prices have reportedly increased by, not $870. Now, Ukraine's ambassador to Australia has criticised the ABC after last night's Four Corners episode that I'm sure none of us were watching. I certainly wasn't. I was watching Sky News, as always. But the episode bizarrely focused on a human perspective on life on the Russian front line. Now, the Ukrainian ambassador accuses the ABC of running Russian propaganda. He says that the program aired last night on Four Corners was the journalistic equivalent of a bowl of vomit. He says it unquestioningly repeated and aired countless blatant lies, historical distortions, racist claims and propaganda narratives emanating from the Kremlin. He says the ABC should be ashamed that it put such total garbage to air. And he's now demanded a meeting with both the ABC boss and executive producer to question them about why they could broadcast this on the taxpayer-funded broadcaster. Bronwyn, this seems to be a new low for the ABC, just blatantly running Russian propaganda, according to the Ukrainian ambassador.
Well, I don't know it's a new low. I think they've sunk pretty low. I did two things this afternoon when I knew we were going to talk about it. I never watched the ABC. The only part of the ABC I listen to is Classic FM. But the other thing to say is this. I also took a look at the ABC Charter again. Now, this was the equivalent of, if you were in World War II, going and behind the lines with a German soldier to say, this is the life of a German soldier in battle. I mean, it is running Russian propaganda to say these nice chaps are just fighting because they have to fight. I mean, it really is an insult to this country. But look at what the Labor government did. Refused to send those helicopters that we no longer wanted. to the Ukraine and let them deal with them. What did they do? They dismantled them and buried them. So where is the truth of their attitude? And if you look at the ABC Charter, we'll never get anywhere with the ABC until it's enforceable at law, because it's Section 6 of the ABC Act, and the last subsection of that section says that no legal action can be brought to enforce the Charter. Now, until that is changed and there is real accountability, nothing is going to change.
Steve, it seems like the ABC is so quick to run, you know, the Russian line, so quick to run anti-Israel accusations. You know, why do you think they take this position? Why can't they just run straight, credible, objective news reports?
They'd be sitting in ABC headquarters tonight saying that what they did last night was balanced out the previous reporting from the Ukrainian side of this war, which is complete nonsense. I mean, I'm loath to suggest this, Shari, because some bright spark at the ABC will probably do it, but what are we going to see next? A special with a reporter embedded with Hamas to tell the Hamas side of the conflict with Israel? Is that going to happen next? I mean, it probably will. I didn't watch it either, but I have seen the edited highlights of what they put to air. We've been covering the Ukraine war now for 2 years. It's an illegal invasion. The Russians are butchers. They went in there and tortured people. The torture was dreadful. It happened. It's been proven. And they should be ashamed of themselves running that. And God forbid that they do the same thing with Hamas.
Steve Price, Bronwyn Bishop, thank you both so much for joining me.